Most people confuse emotional intelligence with being nice. They think emotional intelligence is all about saying, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, over to over yours to yourself while looking in the mirror and thinking that you'll actually get happy. This is not the way to do it. Emotional intelligence is more about being effective with your emotions and ultimately your life. And this is how you develop it. I saw this story once about this perspective that there was this person who was living out on the street, and there were these two different guys who were walking, and they actually both of them they saw this dude who was living out on the street. And this guy who was living out on the street, he was, he had this his own. He's poor. He was a beggar, and he begged for finances, and he begged for money. And both of these guys, they were walking, and they actually stopped and they looked at this person. And one of the person actually he looked at this guy and he said, "Oh, look at him! What a weak person! Just he's living out there. He isn't doing anything with his life, and is wasting his life away." The other person, he looked at this person and he said, "Look at us. Look at how we have failed as a society. We have failed because we are not able to take care of this person. We have failed as a community." And he actually felt guilt in himself. Now, what makes that difference? Why does one person, both of them, they're actually seeing the same situation? One of them is actually blaming him and saying that, okay, he's not strong, he should take charge of his life and should make money and all of these things, while the other person, he feels he has failed as a society. The difference, as we would see, is where a lot of emotional intelligence comes from. It's where you actually get to see the difference is where you get to see that it's actually it's your basic, it's very core to yourself, and we don't even realize it. Now, with that said, welcome to our series on our multi-part series on how to build emotional self-discipline. I'm your host Armughan, and you are watching TruthQuest. And today we are discussing how to develop emotional intelligence. Now, I call this story the Buddhist versus the Machiavellian. And the reason I call him the Buddhist versus the Machiavellian is because on this one side, there's this person who is let's take that person who thought that the person was disgusting. The beggar was disgusting. He felt disgust. He think that he's a weak person, that we shouldn't be helping him. We shouldn't be doing all these things. Now, that person, I would make a bet that person grew up in a place where a lot of emphasis was placed on taking responsibility for your life. A lot of emphasis was placed on taking charge of your life, on being powerful, and things like where we discuss things like the Machiavellian side of the things. And the Machiavellian side of the things is all about power and control, and you just you take control of your life. You have power and you confidence and all these. He values all of these, and he's more to that side, and he looks at life from that perspective. Now, the other perspective, we'll call this the Buddhist. He was probably raised in a place where, yes, confidence, power, all that had a place, but on their hierarchy list, community and love for the community and care for the community, that was much higher than personal confidence and taking responsibilities of your life. And that was actually much higher than that, and doing things for other people. That was his value. And now, if you see this in this perspective, both of them see the same situation, but both of them see from their own perspective. The Machiavellian says this person is weak. The Buddhist says that we as a society have failed. Now, the real question is, whose perspective is right? Who is right and who is wrong? What would you say? Was the Buddhist right, or is the Machiavellian right? Is the Machiavellian right about the beggar should take responsibility and not live out on the streets and go out and find a job and do all these things? Or is the Buddhist right, where he says, okay, we have failed as a society because we are not able to take care of this person who is living out on the street, and we're not able to feed him? The answer to that question is, none of them are. Both of them are wrong, and both of them are right. But how can that be? See, it's. I think the answer to this is deeper than right and wrong, because if we are to talk about being wrong, it's that none of them, not a single one of them, has enough information about that person to conclude any of those to come to any of those conclusions, because all they have seen is that this person is out there on the street. They don't know any history, and they're talking without any context, so they're actually just applying their own perspective. We talked more about this in depth in the last video, where we talked about how human beings are inherently ignorant. You, me, everybody you know, uh, intelligent people, all of us, we are inherently ignorant, and how wisdom is being able to see your ignorance, being able to see how ignorant you are, being able to see beyond your perspective. And no matter how much it's a very simple example is that we gave in the last video as well, is that if your car breaks down and you're going to work and you think that you're a smart person, you'll actually know how ignorant you are, because you don't know anything and you have to call the mechanic to fix your car. See, now that applies to everything in your life. That applies to electricity, central heating, every other thing, like basically that is going on. We don't know squat about it, and we think that we do. So we build up this model of our personality, and this is where it connects with this situation, that we build this model of our personality. It's like a layer of the world, and we see the world from that. We judge the world. Every experience that comes in, we color it in that perspective, and we see it based on that. And 2 people, 3 people, 4, 5, 10, you can increase the number to any, and all the way up to 7.2 billion people. Every person will look at the same kind of situation, same kind of circumstances, same kind of events happening in the world, but every person would conclude different answers. Every person would come to different conclusions, because based on the experiences that they had in life, both of them are actually coming to different conclusions. Based on the experience that they had in life, they have their own perspective. They see the world through that perspective, and they come to their own conclusions. And no matter how much facts, figures, reason, logic, all these things that you give to them, it's very hard to change their perspective. And this is why you see people who are, like, in the religious sense, you see atheists, agnostics, and religious believers. They actually, they actually see the same kind of facts, but they color them in their own way, and they see them their own way, and they reach their own conclusions. And you see them engaging in debates and all these things, and who's right, who's wrong, what's the truth, and all these things. But actually, they're just seeing things. All of them are seeing things from their own perspective. So I think it's very important that you understand this, and we're going to come back to this in a few. And the lesson is basically over here is that you have to be able to hold multiple perspectives in yourself, because the more perspectives you have, the tapestry that you build on your personality, the tapestry that you see the world through, the more multicolored it will be, and the more it will be able to hold within yourself. And ultimately, you must also be able to hold perspectives of yourself, but not attach yourself to them, to see your own ignorance, to see beyond your own ignorance. And this is what I feel a lot of emotional intelligence and wisdom comes from, that you are able to see beyond yourself. You're able to see beyond yourself, and you're able to see the world, and you are able to realize that, yes, I have my perspective, and that's okay. But yes, the more perspectives that you hold within yourself, the better, the wider you can make your personality, and the more richer your tapestry would be, and the more richer your experience would be as well. Now, with that said, the first step to build emotional intelligence is, yes, perspectives are very important. We're going to keep touching on it throughout this podcast. The next step is you have to understand the emotional blame game, and you have to take extreme ownership of what you feel inside of yourself. And what do I mean by the emotional blame game? What do I mean by extreme ownership? We talked about both of these topics in the previous video. We're going to touch them here as well. That the emotional blame game is, let's say that you feel something. It could be anything negative, anything positive. I don't actually like the labels that we place on this spectrum of emotion that we have. It's like, what if we place that on the electromagnetic spectrum? What if we said, okay, these rays are really negative, and these rays are really, the gamma, the alpha, these rays, the gamma is really negative, but on the other side, radio, it's very positive. It's helps us communicate, does all these things. Doesn't make sense. It's a spectrum, and it's all these different things. Yes, some are short, very powerful. Some are long, great for long distance communication. It's like, it's nice. It's a whole spectrum. Exactly the same thing. It's like, you have to be able to see your emotions like a spectrum. There's these really sad. I mean, there's really sad low tones. There was this. There's the, I think, the Death March, or it's by Chopin. The music they generally play when somebody dies. That music is like, it's really sad. It's really low tone, and you feel all the sadness swell up inside of you. On the other hand, you can take something like Vivaldi's Four Season, and you take this Season of Spring, and it's like, it's very jolly, and and you feel that. So it's just like notes on a guitar. Your emotions are the spectrum, and there's nothing wrong with any notes. No notes are wrong. No notes are bad. No notes are positive or negative. Okay, so just being able to see that is very important. Now, I took a little bit of a turn over here, but it's very important to take that. It's like, when you're feeling something either positive or negative, again, let's say you're feeling something that is on the lower end of the spectrum or the higher end of the spectrum, we generally tend to blame something that's outside of ourselves for the reason that we're feeling. You have to stop doing that. You have to stop. And I actually presented you with, if you've seen the last edition in this series, I actually presented you with a choice. And if you made that choice, that means you're watching this video. So welcome. I am assuming that you have taken ownership of yourself, and I congratulate you on doing that. That's actually the first step. Let's move on. Let's go on. Let's take the journey together. And yep, let's go on. So, and we actually talked about this in the previous one as well, that we actually talked about that you have to understand your own triggers. And I actually gave you an exercise to help you do that. And the understanding your own triggers, let's take the Buddhist and the Machiavellian. Like, if the Buddhist has to understand his own self, become aware, because emotional intelligence, the way that they define it, is that it's about self-awareness. And self-awareness is being able to look at yourself objectively. Now, this is a very hard thing to do. Most people don't do this. Most people can't do this, because it's like you're trying to look at yourself. And more oftenly than not, you can't. I mean, you can't look at your own face without a mirror, right? You can't look at your own eyes without a mirror. You can't look at your own self without there being a mirror. And the mirror, in this sense, if you want to look at your own personality, if you want to look at your own emotions, it requires introspection. And introspection, generally, there's these. One of the method is the Eastern method, or the spiritual method, where that's meditation and all these things, where you introspect these things which are going on inside of you. The other one is, the world itself is a giant mirror too, because there are things that would go on in the world. If you live your life, there are things that would go on in the world, and different things will make you feel different way. That is where the mirror process is happening. That something happens. How do you react? What do you feel? What do your thoughts say about it? What perspective and that is where you can actually get a great look at your personality and your perspective. It's not like a complete picture, but if you're a good scientist and you observe it, you can actually get the picture as well. It starts with that, and I feel these are, I call them proxy variables. You can think of them as proxy variables. For example, you can't see the wind. There's this wind blowing and you can't see it. You can actually see the wind. It's like, what would you see? But you can hear the rustling of the leaves, and you can see that the leaves are moving before they were not. So you can conclude that because these leaves are rustling and they're moving, I conclude there's some force that is moving past by them. So you actually used a proxy variable. You actually used that was a proxy variable, to conclude that yes, there's something called wind. So you can use these proxy variables. You can use this mirror that you have, and based on that, you can actually, and you start with your conditioning. And this is actually where you go back into your past and you say, you go back into your past and you look at the conditionings that you have, the kind of conditions you grew up in. What is it that your parents valued most? What is it that you valued most? What is it that, what are the values that you place? For example, for the Buddhist guy, in the story that we talked about, the Buddhist guy, his values were community, taking care of people around you, taking care of your neighbor, and putting society above yourself. Those were the kind of values that had. Generally, you can say that these are like the Eastern values. On the Western side, the Machiavellian, he had values like self-power, self-control, self-esteem, self-confidence, a lot of self you would see in there. So different values, and where do they come from? Maybe they might have read different philosophies. Maybe they might have, maybe they might agree with different things, or maybe they were grown in an environment. Maybe they were inspired by someone who valued who valued these higher than other things. So being able to look at yourself is that way. And I would actually go a step back, and I would, uh, in the emotional blame game, this I'd actually remind you that this is not to look at yourself and blame yourself either. When you take ownership, it's not about blaming yourself, it's about being responsible. And being responsible is having the ability to respond. That's where the word actually comes from. Responsibility is your ability to respond to a situation. It's not your ability to blame yourself for a situation. That would be blamability or something, if I actually had to come up with a word. So I made a new word, blamability. So blamability is different from responsibility. Responsibility is being able to respond. And your responsibility is when you stop blaming yourself, you stop blaming your past, because I've seen a lot of people do this. And when they talk about their conditioning, or when they talk about, okay, the reason that they behave, they realize, okay, this is why I do it. This was my conditioning. But they blame their conditioning. They're like, oh, what can I do? So, yeah, my mother and father, they divorced when I was 7 years old. This is the reason that I behave like this when I'm 70 years old. It's like, that happened 70 years ago, 60, 70 years ago. It's like, it's a long time ago, man. It's like, yes, we all have passed through these different things. I'm not belittling your experience that you had, and that was a very painful experience. All I'm saying is, stop playing that game so you can take ownership of yourself, so you can actually do it. Yes, that happened, and if I was there, I would have done everything I could to prevent you from that. But since that happened, you can't go back to the past and change it. So let's do something about it right now. Okay? So that's your past. If you're blaming your past, somebody around you, something outside of yourself, the government, the politics, the society, anything, like, you can put anything in that bracket. And as long as you're blaming them, you're actually giving them power. So you have to stop giving them power over you, so you can actually start doing this. So the reason we're looking at ourselves is not to blame ourselves, it's to be more aware of ourselves. That is a good distinction to make. Now, the other thing that you need to be careful of is your borrowed beliefs. And your borrowed beliefs are what I call, Saim, check कर लो एक दफ़ा, check कर लो. नहीं ये नहीं चेक करो, बस हो रही है, रिकॉर्डिंग हो रही है. बस अभी कितना टाइम हुआ? बस 25 पे मुझे सिग्नल देना. Your borrowed beliefs are these things that you borrow from other people. It's because, you're inherently ignorant. We don't know how to, go through this life. So we come up with, we borrow these beliefs. We borrow them from our parents. We borrow them from our friends. We borrow them from the society. We borrow them from the books we read, and we believe them. And I think it's not that the borrowing is wrong. It's just borrowing them and thinking they're true without thinking about them and actually saying that, okay, is this a belief that I do want to have in my life? That is, I think, where the danger is. So the next thing you need to be aware of is your borrowed beliefs. And the third thing that you need to be aware of is your values and rules. Now, before we talk about what your values are, what your rules are, what's the search part of it, what's the recognition part of it, I would like to invite you to join my newsletter. And my newsletter is called Truth Thursdays, where every Thursday I send bite-sized wisdom directly to the subscribers, directly into your inbox, to help you become a better version of yourself. If you're not already subscribed, the link to do that is down below. Go ahead and let me share incredible wisdom with you, bite-sized, into your inbox. Now, with that said, let's come back to the values and rules. And there was this interesting story that I read in Tony Robbins' book, and he talked about I think he was talking about his seminar. And in his seminar, there was this guy that he was interviewing, and this guy was a millionaire. He was on the Forbes top 10 list, and he was incredibly athletic, had a family who loved him. And he was actually interviewing him, and he said, okay, do you think you're successful? This guy looked at him and he said, no, I don't think I'm successful. Now remember, this guy is a millionaire. This guy is a multimillionaire, and not a multimillionaire. I think he's a millionaire, and he is been on the Forbes top 10 list. He has an incredible athletic body, and he is also has an incredible family that loves him, and his family was there too, I think. And he says, "No, I'm not successful." And he says, "Why? Why do you think that you're not successful?" Just because he said that because right now my net worth is $3.2 million. I need to give it up to make it up to 4. And the reason my body fat percentage right now is 18%. I need to drop it down to 12%. And my family, I sometimes I don't have optimal relations with my family. For example, there's things that go on around the house, and with my kids especially. And he had, I think, 3 to 4 teenagers at that time. And he's like, I don't want to actually have any. I want to have a completely perfect relationship with them. Now, during this time, there was this other guy. And he's sitting in the front row, and you could see that there's some people you could see that they're just totally vibrant. It was this guy, and he's standing there. And Tony actually walked up to him and said, "Can you please stand up for me, sir?" And he said, "Of course." And he said, "Do you think you're successful?" This guy said, "Yes, I'm absolutely." And he said, "Okay, so what needs to happen for you to feel successful?" And he thought about it, and he said, "Okay, like every day I wake up, I put my feet on the ground, I look up at the sky, and there I am. I feel successful to have because I'm alive. Like every day is a great day to be alive." So actually, they made that one of their rules, and it's all over. They taught that, told that story, and they actually made that a maxim. And he said that every day is a great day to be alive. Now, if you see these two people in the contracts, both of them value success. But both of their ways to reach success is totally different. One of them has it's a tight squeezed way, and it's a completely narrow focused way to it. Like if I'm successful, my body fat percentage needs to be this. I need to be making this amount of money. I need to have this kind of relationship. I need to meet this kind of person. It's like, oh my god, it's like so many things. On the other hand, the person just wakes up. This guy wakes up and he says, "Well, what an experience." So all of you, we actually do this, that we have values. And I think it was Winston Churchill who had his values really narrowed down, and he knew his values, and he knew these top 10 values, and he actually read them, and he read them to himself in his diary. But another thing that we have is rules, and the rules is basically what needs to happen for you to feel your value. It might be love, what needs to happen for you to feel loved, what needs to happen for you to feel successful, what needs to happen for you to feel confident. All the different values. For example, what needs to happen for you to feel confident is, for example, if it's, I need to feel, what needs to happen for me is that I need 10 people every day to tell me that I'm perfect. Then I'll feel confident. Not going to happen, right? I wish there were 10 people who told you that you're perfect every single day, but come on, it's life. So, but what if your value is like, I need to be confident, and you just look myself in the mirror, and I'm standing like Superman, and I feel confident. That's a better value. That's a better rule to get there. So it's a recognition in the phase that where you recognize, okay, your rules, subconscious, and then it's a search because you come up with new rules, or maybe you come up with a value that you want to have in your life. You define your values. Nobody else can do that for you. It's your life. You do it. It's very important to have this. Now, the next part is, I think, is like, now I'll touch again. I think I'll invite you to do this exercise again on your values and rules. Like, write down your list of 10 values, and then actually come up with the rules that you have, like the current rules you have and the new rules that you're going to build. And that has actually helped a lot. I have a list of values that I value love, I value confidence, I value connection, like deep connections. These are the values that I have in my life, and the rest. But I think we'll conclude this podcast on the note that the greatest thing is being able to have multiple perspective without attaching yourself to them. And I'll say this again to emphasize the point that at any number at any moment in your life, there are an infinite things going on around you. There are an infinite perspectives that you can have. There's an infinite numbers. Like, you could look here and here and here, and based on that, it's like there's this single garden, and you're looking, and there are an infinite point in space and time. It's like, even it's even much difficult to comprehend if you add time in there. But just space, there are an infinite point that you can look at them and actually come up with a perspective. For example, you might be really high up and you might be able to see an aerial view of the garden, and you might be able to see other things like where the garden is, but you might not actually, in that case, you will not actually get a high resolution image of what's inside it. As compared to a person who's standing right next to the garden, he doesn't know the position of the or the area where the garden is geographically located, but he would actually have a much better perspective of what's inside the garden. So it's like you have to be able to see the garden in multiple different perspectives. The more perspectives you have, the better it is. But still, you can't have every perspective. You can't have multiple. You can't have every. And then the next part is, I think, the moment you pick one is where you start limiting yourself. So your ability to not limit yourself is, again, it comes back to your ability to hold multiple perspectives within yourself. It makes the tapestry of your personality richer, and and with that, it's your ability to recognize your own ignorance, and that's where a lot of emotional wisdom comes from. With that said, do the exercise, because that's where you would have, and the exercise is your values and rules, and I'll repeat that. So write down your list of values, and then think what are the current rules that you have for these, like what needs to happen for you to feel loved, for example, or successful or confident, whatever your values are. And then come up with new rules and make your rules easier. Make your rules easier so that it's not like there are 10 things that need to happen for you to feel that way. Make it easier for you to feel that way. So with that said, I'm going to see you in the next video, and in the next video we are going to talk about emotional self-discipline 1.0, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to build on the foundations that we are building. We're doing great so far, and wait till you see the next one. Until then, take care. If you have enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to watch this video on my side. It also relates to physics, philosophy, and personal development. And also, don't forget to subscribe. Continue seeking truth and become a truth seeker.